Good morning. Good morning. First, let me say I'm sorry I can't be here with you live today, but I am recording this broadcast for you so that, we can keep things up. Today, I am participating in a fundraiser for a very dear friend of mine who is, oh my goodness, do you see what I just noticed? I didn't change my little sign here. Yep, so I'm just gonna get rid of it. Yeah, just don't need to see that I didn't change it. Okay, anyways, we're doing a fundraiser for a very dear friend of mine. She is experiencing some pretty serious medical issues right now. And of course, with medical issues come medical bills. And who's got money for that? So that's what we're doing. Our goal is to um, raise money to pay for these bills. Now, with that in mind, do you see? Oh, there it is. Do you see the QR code up there in the um, upper corner of your monitor? That is a QR code that will take you to a GoFundMe page if you are in a place and you can make a direct donation. You don't have to. I'm just saying that it's there if your heart moves you. Um Again, you don't have to. It's just there. So what are we going to do today? We are going to digitize. Yay! All right. Um, I know there's no questions over here. I had nobody to say good morning to. Good morning to all of you. I will, when I get done with the event, I'll obviously come back and answer any questions or respond to any comments you might have. So don't be afraid to talk amongst yourselves or, ask a question. I'll get to it, I promise. And with that, let's go to the digitizing monitor. You ready? Here we go. There it is. I'm going to be digitizing this design in Wilcom. Um, in fact, let me just and I've created actually I've altered a logo that uh, has been um, presented to me before, but it's simple enough, and I thought we could get through it in a short amount of time. Now, this logo was um, was requested to be a hat, actually left of center hat. Let's make it just a little bit smaller. Um, and when I do a hat logo, I have a template that I created to help me size my artwork before I get started. I like to digitize at actual size. That way, I know everything's going to fit. So I'm going to come up here, go into my files, find my hat placement template, and open it. It is, here, we'll just change this. It is 2.6 inches by 5. Actually, it should be 2.5 inches. So I'm just going to change that real quick and enter. Um, and you can see that I have a center line here. And I also have seam lines to represent the two seams that go down the center of a 6-panel hat. I take my artwork and I size it and place it in here. Now we know this is ultimately going to be a left of center. Oh, which this little box here, it just tells me where the center is of left of center. All right. So once I have my artwork sized and in place, I am going to lock it in position because I don't want to accidentally shift it around. And I am going to go ahead and delete my template because it's done its job. I don't need it anymore. And then I'm going to look this over. One of the things that I like to remember is that lettering is very difficult to read on a hat. Remember, you're not, somebody is not going to put their nose right up to the top of your hat and read it. They're going to read it from a distance. So you want to make sure that the letters are large enough that they not only stitch out well, but they're legible. So let's start with the lettering. I try to do, for hats, I like to use a 7mm letter. That's 7mm tall. And you'll see why in just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and type my words. Buy, comma, rent, comma, sell. Next line, sample, one, and then the next line, text, here. I'm going to come down here where it says height. I'm going to change that to a 5, forgot we're doing hats, 7mm. And I'm going to change my letter style to a serif font. And pretty basically I use the garment. And we're going to create. And I'm going to change my color so you can see it. Okay. So this is a 7mm font. The first thing I see is that the buy, rent, sell line will not fit up here. Sample will probably work okay. Text we're going to be okay because we're going to have to make that slightly smaller, but it'll still be within our 5 to 7mm. But before I break these apart and resize them, I'm going to do some more global changes. Global just means I'm going to affect everything in that element. In this case, the element is all 3 lines of these letters. I'm going to go to the underlay and I'm going to change it to a center run underlay, and I'm going to get rid of the zigzag. I do that with small lettering that may be less than 1mm in their columns. You don't need the zigzag. Your center is going to go right down the middle, and there really isn't any room left and right of it for an edge run underlay. So I work with just the center underlay. Now I'm also going to go into my fill. As I stated last week, in our broadcast last week, I was going to talk about some standard settings that I use with hats. One of those is to use a fill setting, a density setting of 0.3. Okay, that's 30/100ths of a millimeter. That just gives us a little more stitch count, but it brings the letters a little bit closer. I also use a 0.3. Oh, there we go. A 0.3 pull compensation, because we all know that the letters are going to pull in and become smaller, narrower, and we want to compensate for that. We still want the letters to retain their boldness so that, again, they're legible. Now, at this point, I'm going to break them apart. That's this button up here. And these are all functions that are pretty standard in just about all software. And I need to go back one. There's something very important that we didn't change. So I put them all back together again. Going back to our lettering, we're going to scroll down here. And we are going to change our sequence, the way it's going to stitch out, to center out and from bottom to top. All right, remember with hats, that's what we do. We stitch from bottom up, center out. Now, when I go to break this apart, the first line is now the text. Second line is our sample one. And the third line is our buy, rent, sale line. Now, we need to figure out what to do with this line. The client's going to want it. It's part of their logo. It's part of their tagline. It defines what they do in their logo. Obviously, this is a house or a building structure of some sort, and they buy, rent, and sell structures. This is very important to them. It's part of their overall message, but it's not going to fit here. So we are going to move it to below the structure, and we're going to change the lettering to 5 millimeters. Now, that's going to be fairly small to be read, but I think the client is still going to like it. Of course, after we're all done, we will consult with the client. Yes, I could do it beforehand, but that would require doing all the digitizing anyways, and then making changes as needed. This way he's got it, he can see it, or she, and they can stitch it out. And then if they determine that there needs to be a change, then we can change it there. Now, text here is also a bit large, so we're going to change its size also to a 5. Still, it's going to work. In sample 1, we're going to place it. And the size, top to bottom, is good, but I'm going to bring it in a little bit so that it fits within our structure. Okay. We're going to center these, so I'm going to select these two. I'm going to use a center alignment, and then I'm going to use my left arrow to bring them back in position. Okay, excuse me just a moment. Sorry about that. Just a little leftovers from my COVID days. Okay, so our lettering is in place. Now, these two are in a red color, so we're going to set that up as a red color. And this one, it shows black, but I want the client to have the versatility of changing the color, of having it not be linked to another element in case they want to use a different color. So I'm going to use just a generic color. Now, since our typing is done, I'm going to set the keyboard aside. And you notice that I used a pre-digitized font. It's a font that I've used many times before. I know it will stitch out well. Of course, I test stitch all of my work, so I can know which fonts I like to use, which ones don't stitch as nicely. And this one stitches well, so I'm very confident with it. We're going to go do this black L structure and the windows. So with that, I'm going to increase my image size. And when I do that, I want you to notice the as I'm digitizing, I want you to notice the sizing of the columns. So I'm going to pick up my satin stitch and the column tool. I'm going to place my first node. And do you see where it says there, this is now 4.32 wide. That's the width of our column. That's going to become important when we go to add our underlay. Select my next point and my next point. Now we have this point here. Now if I click here to lay my next node here and then come back here, this is going to change the stitch angle. I want to keep my stitch angle as close to left to right as possible. So we're going to back that off and we're going to come down to this area. Okay, we're going to come straight across to where that next turn in our element is. Then we're going to come out, and because they both come together, that left and right side, we're going to put our nodes together. We're going to hit enter and generate our stitches. Enter and generate our stitches. Now we know that here, just in case you didn't see it, go left and right. We know that this column is just a bit over 8 millimeters, which is the widest we really want to go with a satin stitch on a hat. Let me escape that. But you see here, it's done in auto split. That's a default setting in the software. It will auto split at 7 millimeters. But we know that we can stitch 8 millimeters pretty confidently. So we're going to take that and we're going to remove the auto split. All right. And while we're here, we're going to add just a couple of more stitch angles. And we're doing that because this stitch angle is pretty steep. And enter. Now you see here, this is some shortening of stitches, and that's because we've made a really tight turn here. So what that means is that, and I'm going to show you here. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, now what that means is that we're going all the way up, we're coming down, and then we're going to shorten it just a little bit so that we can make that turn without bulking up that corner, that point. It'll still look good. It'll still have good definition, but it won't be so bulky that it's making the same needle penetration in the same spot a dozen times. All right, so I'm going to get rid of that. We're going to delete that. Now, we're still finishing off the rest of our letter here. And you see, this is just an upside down version of the previous one. So I'm actually going to work it from the top down. I know, it's a hat file. We want to stitch from the bottom up. And we can change that once we're done here. Oh, got to get our color back. Once we're done here, we can change that by moving our starts and stops. Again, we're at 8 millimeters. We're going to remove the auto split. We're going to go into our node function and we're going to locate our start and stop. This red cross here is the stop. This green is the start. Place our start here. Place our stop up here. And you can see it just kind of changed the dynamic of the file. Now we need to do these windows. They're a little close together. If you measure this, let me get the measuring tool out. If you measure from here to here, that's less than a millimeter. That's really not going to visually show for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our boxes, and we're going to put them at least 1 to 1.25 millimeters apart. I'm going to use this box tool, which allows me just to draw from one corner to the next, my box. Gotta get rid of that green. We created our first box. It's got a stitch angle of 60 degrees. We don't want that. We want a 0 stitch angle, so it goes left to right. We've created one box. Now we're going to select this and we're going to duplicate it. And in Wacom, you can duplicate it by highlighting the element you want, right mouse click, and dragging it up or down or to the left or to the new position. I'm going to hide my artwork for a moment so you can see the distance here. Then I bring up the measuring tool again, the ruler, and we're going to measure that we now have 1.19 distance between our two boxes. One other thing we want to do is we want to make sure that they're actually lined up together. So we're going to use an alignment tool, bring them together, turn our artwork back on. We're going to select I seem to have duplicated these. There we go. We're going to select them both. I'm going to group them. And then I'm going to right click, drag, and drop. Take the artwork away again. And you can see we measure that we have approximately the same distance left to right that we had top to bottom. Okay. So I'm going to select all of these. I just drag a box around all of them so they're all selected. I'm going to group them so they don't go anywhere. Bring back my artwork. Center it a little bit because, those windows need to be centered to our building. And then we're going to go out and look at the whole piece. All right, here we are so far. We have the L shape of our structure and we have our windows, but they're green. We're going to change that to black. But before we do that, we want to change our spacing because remember I said I use 0.3 when I'm doing density for hats. So we're going to change that to 0.3. We're also going to change the pole compensation to 0.3 because I use a 0.3 setting. Now, these are just guidelines. After I've tested this, if the compensation looks to be too much, I'll back it off some. The density is usually always pretty good at 0.3, but if it looks to be too dense, I'll back off some. One other thing we want to do is we want to go in there and get our underlay. On hats, people have difficulty with their hooping of hats, so the hats shift a little bit. And an edge run underlay, though it looks beautiful for satin columns, does not work well for a lot of people doing hats. So we're going to get rid of the edge run underlay. And because this is a wider satin, we do want to do something more than just an edge run. So I'm going to do a zigzag. We only need one underlay, so we're going to get rid of the second zigzag. Make sure we have the same thing going with all of our black elements. All right, now that they're all there, we're going to change their color. We're going to return our artwork. And we're going to do our next element. which is this roof line. Again, it's going to be a satin stitch, and we're going to enlarge so we can see where our lines are, and we're going to start our column. Click and click. Did you see that? It was just under 4 millimeters. That's good. We click and click. We're now at 5 millimeters up here. Click, and about 6 millimeters there. Enter to generate our stitches. Pull our artwork. Want to change our density to 0.3. Change our compensation to 0.3. Change our underlay to a zigzag for the same reason on the red roof that we did for the black L. Don't need people have difficulty with the edge run underlay, but we need more than just a center run. Okay. Now, if I go up here and enlarge this a bit, I know that my satin stitch is going to pull in some. Think of it like cinching up your shoelaces. When you go to, put your tennies on and you cinch up those laces, that center area over the tongue, it gets tighter. It narrows up. Well, the same thing is going to happen with your satin stitch. But the other thing that's going to happen is these ends here are going to get longer. When it pulls in, something's got to give, so it pushes out on the ends, which can be a problem here because we need to have a slight gap. So I'm going to take the upper one and I'm going to move it up. Give me a gap. And I'm going to take that and add the red and move that up also. Come on. And up. So we have another gap. And that looks good. Now that that's mostly done, we need to look at pathing. Remember, we want our bottom up, center out. So in this case, I want to make sure that my blue is stitching first. So I'm going to put this way at the bottom, and you'll see why in just a moment. I'm going to work from the bottom up by shifting my sequence down. Then I want to do this first black, so it's going to go next. The second black, so it's going to go third. I want to take my windows and put those in place. And now we're going to do the next red text. And we're going to finish off with our roof line. So if you look over here, you'll see that they're in sorted by color, and they work bottom up, center out. Now we could make multiple color changes. We could do the blue, the black, the red, the red, the black, the red, the black. But in a smaller design, I don't think that's going to be necessary. Once it's all done, once our pathing is done, once our color changes are set, our densities, our underlay, I'm going to select all of the elements here. Oops, go off the screen. And I'm going to group them so they don't move away from each other. Then I'm going to change their position to center, which is 0 on the x-axis and 0 on the y-axis. We're going to go back to fit so we can see that we're in center. And that is our design. Okay. From there, we're going to do a test stitch and right off. Remember when I changed the angles down here in this bottom corner? I can see that I missed changing the angles up here on the red. So we're going to ungroup so I can get back to this roof line. We're going to add some stitch angles. And again, we're going to enter, and you'll see there's some shortening here, but that's okay. We've kept our nice straight angles here and here, and then it will work itself around that corner. Let's go back to fit, actually a little smaller, select it all, group, make sure our x-axis and our y-axis are still at 0. And one last thing to do, right now, this design has defaulted to have the start point at bottom center. There are a lot of people that use bottom center with hats. I haven't. It's something my people are accommodate for. So I want to make sure that my setting places the start in center. And for whatever reason, it won't do that. We've got we've had an upgrade to the software. It's possible that might be a software glitch. It's something I'll address. But you place your start point where you want it. Okay? Then I save the file. Where do I want to save this? Let's just put it here. I export it to whatever machine style I want. I create a print preview, this is a production sheet, and then I save that as a PDF. Again, so that my my clients can know what color change needs to happen where. And then that file is done. I'll take it to the machine and I'll test run it on a hat. Okay. Now, I don't know how much time we've had. Probably going to go over. Wouldn't be the first time, right? Now, remember I said I wanted, last week I said I wanted to try and do 2 design files for you. Let's make this a patch. How do we make it a patch? Well, in this software, I will highlight the whole element and I will go over and create an offset of 4 millimeters. I'll create it in a run stitch so I can see if it's in the place I want it to be. And I will take off the create offset for holes because I don't want that. I just want an outside line. Ready? Here we go. Thinking. All right. Well, not quite what I had in mind. Let's get rid of that. We don't like that one. Let's try it again. That's it. Cut sharp corners was on. We don't want that. We want it to be kind of rounded. You ready? There we go. Much nicer. Now, we're going to get rid of the centerpiece here. And then we're going to come up and we're going to edit. We're going to edit this line section here, the bottom line section, and these 2 end sections. We want to square this off. We want to make it a straighter line. So I'm going to go up. Going to highlight it. Going to select these nodes and delete. Let's go back and see what we got here. Yep, let's delete that stray node there. Let's bring this out so it's straight. Only we need to be slightly rounded, don't we? So I'm going to add a couple of nodes, delete a node, round off a corner. Let's see. Let's go ahead and straighten this out. Just depends on what you want your patch to look like. Yeah, that's not too bad. We want a node there to line up with that node. Delete, take this one and round it. Take all these nodes here and delete. So we now have that nice straight line. And take this one, delete, delete, and rounded. Okay. What do you think? Keep in mind this is just a rough outline, but I think overall it looks good for a patch. It'll be stitched on twill, so we don't need any background thread. We need to outline it though. This line's a little crooked. Let's see if we can't straighten that out a little bit. Oh, it's even more crooked, just the other direction. But let's go with it, okay? Let's go with it. We've now highlighted our outline. It is currently a single run stitch. That will become our placement stitch, okay? We're going to duplicate that, and we're going to make it a triple stitch in a different color. That is now our tack down stitch. I use a triple stitch because if you happen to accidentally trim through one of the first stitches, the other two will help support. Hopefully you haven't trimmed through all 3 stitches. Doesn't usually happen. And then we're going to duplicate this again. We're going to duplicate this line again. Oops. Where'd my keystroke go? There we go. And we're going to change it to another color. Where'd it go? It didn't duplicate. We're going to change it to another color. Let's change it to this blue, which is kind of where we started. And then we're going to change it to a satin stitch. And yep, I knew it was going to do that. We're going to get rid of that. Let me delete that line. And we want to actually do a copy, not a repeat. Copy. Oh. Well, that explains why it was there. Change the color. Make it a satin stitch. All right. Now, with patches, I have another couple of guidelines that I use. Patches, I use a 4mm satin column. Okay? Yeah, bulks it up a little bit, but remember it's going to cinch in. I also want to make sure that this is going to have a good fill. So again, I change the fill, the spacing, the density down to a 0.3. I change the compensation to a 0.3. Okay. And then the underlay. Here, I not only use an edge run underlay. Remember, now we're making a patch. So we want to make sure that we have good support on both the left and the right side of our satin column. And remember, we've trimmed away the fabric on the outside edge. So we want to make sure we've got some good support, and that's going to need more thread. So we use an edge run underlay, and I use a double zigzag. Okay? Again, to give it that structure, that foundation, the support. Now, we've made our hat design, and we've made it into a patch. You want to see it run? Let's make it go just a little bit faster. I don't know if you can see that, but the lettering does have just the center run underlay. We have a zigzag for our wider satins. Stitching bottom up, center out, bottom up, center out. Our roof line again is a zigzag. Tack down, stitch. And now you can see, I'm going to slow this down just a bit. Let's go back just a bit. Okay, it's made a center run, or I'm sorry, excuse me, it's made an edge run, underlay, and then it's going to do a zigzag and come back and do another zigzag before we do the satin fill. Okay? There you have it. We did a hat design and a patch design. Let me know if you have any questions. Again, I'm sorry I'm not here with you live today. I want to thank you again for being here. I hope you found our digitizing what do we want to call this? Our digitizing program today. I hope you find it helpful. I hope if you can, you've taken advantage of our QR code. Next week, I'll be back, 10 a.m. Central Time on Saturday. Let's see what we can do for next week. Put out some suggestions. Let me know. And I hope to, I'll be here. See you next week. Where'd it go? Time to say goodbye. Bye.
Wasn't that fun? Do you have more questions? Do you want to learn something new? Join me at quicktostitch.com for coffee and conversation, and we'll talk about it. Embroidery machines, designs, and business. Hope to see you soon.